Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome. Before we get to the episode, I have a couple announcements for those of you who are interested in going deeper, working more deeply with me. And this month, there are a couple opportunities to do so. The first one is I have a weekend workshop coming up. It's called Galactic Warrior, From Imaginary Fear to Embodied Courage under the new moon in Aries. We're going to be meeting for about an hour on Friday, April 17th and Saturday, the 18th for guided energy work, embodiment practices, and visualization. And the work we're going to be doing will revolve around meeting our fears with courage, with compassion, and really transforming that stuck energy into creative prowess. I really designed this workshop for those of you who identify as being mystics, creatives, intuitives, and we're going to create a space, a really warm, inviting, sacred space as a community so that we can deepen into listening to our own knowing and being able to really process everything that Aries season is bringing up for us. This is, as you may know, a very Aries season. A lot is happening. There's a lot of fire. And I really want to support all of us in being able to, really allow that into our body on a cellular level, and then to see what wisdom wants to emerge and maybe even wants to be shared with our wider community. So if that sounds fun to you, the links will be in the show notes below. Just so you know, it is a pay what you can workshop. So if you click on the link, the join now button will lead you to the standard suggested donation, which is $55. But if you would like, there are instructions in the page that will allow you to really pay whatever is available for you. And I really want to make this work accessible for any and all people who are interested and who feel like they can really benefit from this work. The second announcement I have is for April, I am experimenting with opening up limited spots for recorded tarot readings. Now, these readings are about 20 minutes in duration. And if you have been a listener of the podcast, this is a really special opportunity to receive an audio note that is calibrated specifically for any inquiries you might have on your journey. So whatever's really coming up for you, I would love the opportunity to be able to serve you through the tarot. The tarot is one of my closest companions in my personal spiritual journey. And I've been doing a few of these, and each one of them have been really special. So feel into if there's resonance for you. If you would like to receive support, this is a really great way to do so. And just for your information, if you choose to become a founding member of my Substack, which supports the creation of this podcast and supports my work in general, then you get this recorded tarot reading for a little bit of a lower price than if you were just to book it one-off. And for as long as you support the podcast, annually you will receive the recorded tarot reading. So this feels like a really lovely way to be in kind of direct you know, two-way support where you support the work, I get to support you. And yeah, if that sounds exciting, I would love to support you in that way and receive your support as well. All right, let's get to the episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I want to talk about the fire of Aries in this episode. I was just recording the April episode for the podcast, which you can go back to. And as I'm kind of sitting with the energy of the month and really sitting with the different astrological lineup, I started contemplating the energy or the kind of spiritual power that Aries affords us. And there was something I wish I had talked about in that episode that I want to speak to here. And this kind of feels to me like it's a separate teaching, um, which is around the spirituality of what Aries invites us into. So we know that Aries is a fire sign, right? We know Aries is ruled by Mars. We know Aries is what we call a cardinal sign in astrology, which means that Aries starts the cycle, right? And, really, when we're thinking about cardinality, as opposed to fixedness or mutability, and when we're talking about Aries being a fire sign as opposed to like water sign, earth signs, air signs, there are really no hierarchy, right? They all have to be understood relationally. They are all in connection, communication, and relationship with one another. So it's not like there's something inherently more spiritual for any one sign. And I do want to say that in the beginning because sometimes the conversation, especially around signs, can veer off into that direction, right? It can veer off into, oh, I hate, I don't know, Aries or Gemini or whatever that is, right? But really, when we zero in on these energies, they are simply manifestations of the infinite energy, right? The infinite life source that is always flowing through everything. Now, Aries speaks to a very specific kind of initiation. One thing that I talked about in that episode for April is how this Aries season is inviting us to move a little bit faster, right? The message that came through was to follow the flow of the mundane as well as to not second guess ourselves, right? So the invitation here has to do with really being with the river of life, really being with how life force energy, right, that we are experiencing personally within our bodies are actually much vaster energy. It is a what we call a personal life force or our personal chi, right, in the kind of Chinese cosmology, is actually uh, a manifestation of the cosmic chi that is moving through our individual body. So, really, when we're talking about life force energy, we're not talking about our bodies producing its own life force. We're talking about how this body is a conduit, how this body is a vessel for this greater intelligence. So then, when we think about it from that perspective, and then we see the phenomenon of Aries, of this cardinal fire, right? Which is really akin to, when you strike a match and you start that fire, right? It requires that force so that the fire can start and it can then spread, right? Aries is really inviting us to move at a pace that shows us almost like as this X-ray energy where we are holding on to things, where we are holding on to identities that are actually not part of our essence, right? Whenever we are in a space of operating from identity, the truth is we are not in essence. That's just kind of a universal spiritual teaching that I want you to start really feeling into because this is so important. We live within a context, we live within a matrix that is governed by identity, right? So much of who we are is governed by, oh, I'm a mother, right? Or I'm a teacher, I'm an employee. That is how we build our lives. That is the kind of energy that grounds us in uh, the three-dimensional reality. But Aries asks us to go beyond that. Aries asks us which of these identities are holding you back? Which of these identities are making it impossible for you to be honest about what it is that not only you desire, but is actually moving through you, right? Desire is actually secondary. Desire is simply our body, our minds, our hearts, our emotions telling us that, hey, there's this energy that's moving through you right now. Go here, right? That's what desire really is. Desire isn't innate necessarily to our soul. Desire is simply a phenomenon of something moving through us and then being registered as, oh, I want that, right? I want to move towards this. This feels like fuel to me so that I can make movements. And from that movement, we who are really fractals of the greater, vaster intelligence gets to move the story along. We get to move the plot along. So desire isn't something to worship, but desire isn't something to ignore either. Because desire is telling us, right, that we are currently, as a vessel, being moved towards a specific direction. It's like when you desire, I remember when I was really young, around the age of 13, 14, feeling the desire to be a musician. And this to me is such a beautiful manifestation of how my life is wanting to blossom through my desire to be a musician. Now, I have my own mental story about how far I've made it or I haven't made it as a musician up until this point. But that's beside the point, right? That's not, that doesn't matter at the end of the day. It doesn't matter because we are infinite beings and we, in some shape or form, get to do this over multiple opportunities. You know, even if you just look at this in terms of biologically, right? If I never, let's say, make it as a musician in this lifetime, eventually I will pass away and I will transform into a different format. And that format might very well be, you know, part of this organism that became a great musician. So you never really know, right? The truth is our understanding is so limited to what we see and what we experience unless we really decide to step back and look at the larger picture. And so Aries, in its speed, in its initiatory fire, is really inviting us to look at the tension of what it is that we are being drawn to, the gap between what we are being drawn to and the identities that we hold that makes closing the gap impossible. And Aries doesn't make this comfortable, right? Anybody who has Aries placements or have worked with people who have prominent Aries placements know that this is a combative energy, right? This is a challenging pathway. The Aries energy isn't built to last, right? That friction needs to be forceful, it needs to be so powerful so that a fire can start. Imagine from no fire to fire. It's profound, right? And what is required is a momentary loss of grasp of mental identities. We must let go of this idea that I am this kind of person and I do this kind of thing and this is how I assert my who I am in the world, right? And it's funny because there are some astrologers who would say that Aries is focused on identity. Aries wants to assert the I am, right? But the way that Aries asserts the I am, when we look at it from an energetic perspective, is not through kind of mental mere assertion, right? Aries does this through action. It is through what we do that that identity becomes solidified. In other words, if you want to be an artist, make art. If you want to be a mother, mother. Not just your own children, you can mother anyone. Anybody who needs mothering at any given time, you can play the role of mothering them. If you want to be a teacher, teach. You don't need a classroom. You just have to be present enough to see who is available to receiving your wisdom. You don't even have to say words around it. It can be a silent transmission. That moment where your eyes met another person at a grocery store and you smile at them could be the first time that that person has experienced another human being smiling at them. And here's the thing about our identities, right? For most people, the mentally constructed identities are very difficult to uphold because we can't see ourselves. That's why, uh, that's why we very often do things to try to prove ourselves and reassert our identity because in reality, we can't see ourselves. Have you ever noticed if you walk into a room full of people who look at you with curiosity, who wants to know everything about you, who wants to hear about your experience genuinely, who takes what you have to say seriously, you become a different person than if you walk into a room and everybody is just on their phones. Nobody's saying hi. Do you notice that you become a different person? Because our identities are always in response, the identity we choose to step into is influenced by our ecosystem. And so with Aries, right, this question of I am has to do with acting on behalf of ourselves to choose which environment can help me experience parts of myself that I want to meet today. That level of agency of being able to say, I want to be in that room because I want to have that kind of conversation is a way to experience ourselves, right? Through both our agency, which then shows us back who we actually are. So the initiation of Aries has so much to do with letting go, with releasing the stuck points within our bodies. Have you ever found yourself at an event, maybe a party, and then someone comes up to talk to you and they seem like a genuinely cool person, and then you are too nervous or too distracted to actually have eye contact with them? To me, the Aries experience is exactly that, right? It is when life shows up at your door, do you have the capacity to engage? Do you know that life is always conspiring in your favor? And if you don't know that, why? What are you holding on to that makes it so difficult to see that? That makes it so difficult to have access to life wanting to meet you where you're at. If you're listening to this, I know that you are a really powerful being. I know that in order for you to even be able to pick up an episode like this and listen this far, you are someone who is blessed on so many different levels to be able to have a conversation like this together, right? So if you find yourself in situations where you look around and you say, I don't like this, notice a couple things. And this is what I'll leave us with. Notice where you are attached to an identity. And that attachment can look like a positive thing or it can look like a negative thing, right? Earlier, right before recording this podcast, I was talking to my partner about not feeling motivated, feeling lost in my life. We pulled a couple tarot cards, which is what we do in this household. Um, and my partner asked me a question that was extremely potent, which was, what if you act as if you are your own employee? What would you do? What would be the next step if you weren't, Jonathan, the teacher, you weren't Jonathan, the, creator of healing the spirit, right? And whatever it is that I'm creating. What if you're Jonathan, the employee? What would you do? And that really stopped me in my tracks because I realized that my attachment to this podcast is my baby. This work is an extension of me, is actually really getting in the way of me being able to show up fully for all of you, with all of you, for myself, right? Because really, we are all one. You're listening to this because I am reflecting some aspect of your intelligence back to you, which is really universal intelligence. And that was a moment of awakening for me. This is something that is so exciting about Aries energy. My partner is an Aries rising, actually. So there is that martial quality that, they force people into. And I I was really grateful because otherwise I would be, spending another 3 hours being confused, pulling yet another tarot card, which by the way is beautiful. As you know, I love the tarot, but there's a way I'm going to call us in here, right? There's a way in which, as spiritual people, we are so addicted to guidance. Why? Is it because on some deeper level, we don't believe that our guidance is always moving through us? And what begins to unfold and unlock when you realize your guidance is always moving through you, even when your mind can't catch up with it? To me, this is the Aries medicine because when you recognize that that intelligence is always flowing through you, you are simply a vessel, you can be free because you know that you have always been free, that you were never not free. So when you're in that space of fully being in touch with that innate freedom, that is an underlying operating principle of this universe, then you are infinitely powerful, right? And you don't even have to check yourself because you know that you are in flow. You are holding hands with life itself. And you're moving from that space of complete faith and complete trust. And you don't need an identity anymore. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be anything. You just are. I'm sending you so much love on this path, and I'll see you again very soon.